Today we're diving into more Addicts of Reddit. This video is a little different because we're covering acid, also known as LSD. While LSD isn't typically considered physically addictive, that doesn't mean it's harmless. It can still be abused, become habitual, and completely distort someone's sense of reality. The two stories we're covering today show exactly that, so if you enjoy these videos, like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. Tried to explain what it feels like to be on LSD whilst I was on LSD. How acid feels while I'm on it. You feel normal, like you're trying to make sense of the shiz going on around you. But then you realize that this is your reality, and in actual fact, the shiz going on around you is happening a lot differently, except you're on acid and it just gets deeper and deeper. So what you see and feel gets further from reality. When, in actual fact, to a sober person, you could just make yourself look like a crackhead. There is a next level of deepness that you cannot explain. You can try to act normal, but eventually, the falseness of your perception of reality will just get you deeper into the trip, and you'll be further from what's actually going on around you. Time begins to break down and just falls into one big energy where you let your thoughts and processes run deeper, and it really does control your trip. When you think hardest about time, that's when it breaks down and you can't understand it anymore. You get so lost being on acid that you forget you're on it. But then, the more time goes by where you've forgotten you're on it, the further you get from reality. Occasionally you can have these deep thoughts where you acknowledge that you're on drugs, and to everyone else around you it probably looks really weird whatever you're doing. Just like I will read this at some point and think, what the funk was I thinking? The deeper you get into this thought process, the more you start to think about when you took the acid. Then you realize there is no specific point when it hit you, as everything breaks down further. It gets weirder and weirder and weirder until eventually you can't separate real from imagination and you just enjoy it. And if that means you look like a crackhead to the people around you, it probably means you just have to deal with looking like a crackhead. This first story follows a Reddit user named GoodVibesLame who took a massive amount of acid, completely lost control, ended up naked in public, and eventually had a terrifying encounter with police. 3,750 to 4,500 micrograms, LSD, nightmare trip report. First things first. As you can see by the title, this trip ended up being one of the most powerful I have ever been through, and I was in no condition to be taking acid at all, let alone such a massive amount. I was an idiot. Learn from my mistakes. It was a little less than a year ago. A good friend and I had been tripping 1 to 2 times a month for about 6 months, and had been slowly increasing the doses we had been taking. By this time, I had taken 1,000 micrograms a few times and was extremely comfortable at this dose. I wanted a little more excitement for this particular night, so I got in touch with my source and arranged to pick up a higher dose. I met him around 5:30 in the afternoon after work, right at the beginning of a long weekend. He told me that he had a new batch of LSD that had just come in and that it was super strong, so I went with that instead of the other acid I had been buying. What I didn't realize at the time was that this sheet of acid was between 250 to 300 micrograms per tab, so by failing to ask more about this new batch, I sealed my fate. I took 15 tabs of this blotter all at once around 6 o'clock with my buddy, who took 4 tabs to be safe, and we decided to watch YouTube videos until we came up. What follows is a little foggy. All in all, I only remember a small portion of this trip. 6:30 p.m. This is when the effects started to become very clear. My heart started pumping more, and I could feel the stuff climbing up my spine. At this stage, I also started getting afraid that I would have a bad trip. I don't know why. The vibrations were already pretty bad at this point. 7 p.m. The first peak hits me. I was not ready for it to take hold so quickly. In the past, it had sometimes taken 90 minutes until I even started to notice the drug. I made it through this one okay by allowing YouTube to distract me. 9 p.m. The next wave hits me and just blows me the funk away. I remember looking at the TV and seeing a flower bloom out from the screen toward my face. As it neared me, I noticed that there was a woman standing in front of it. Flabbergasted and completely unable to communicate, I stared at her face wide-eyed for a few seconds. She looked deep into my eyes and raised a finger to her lips, telling me to shh, before exploding into a kaleidoscope of colors that blanketed the room. As I snapped out of that, I was extremely confused and afraid. I yelled out, "What the funk was that?" And my friend started to freak out, I believe because we were seeing the same thing. He doesn't remember this portion of the trip at all. 9:40 p.m. Since that last experience, we were both getting more and more worked up, feeding off each other's wild energy until it literally became a screaming match. Both of us were now 100% convinced that the world was coming to an end right outside, and that it was our fault for some reason. I made the biggest mistake of the whole night at this time. I broke all the rules of tripping in one move. I walked outside by myself in my boxers, while on somewhere between 3,750 and 4,500 micrograms of LSD. At this point, I was peaking extremely hard. I couldn't really see anything. On a dose as high as this, it's kind of like you lose your original 5 senses and have a 6th sense that can perceive everything all at once. It's like every bit of sensory input comes at you on a single plane, if that makes sense. So it's 9:45 p.m. now. Somehow, I have made it across a busy street without getting hit by a car and have also managed to lose my boxers. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. I am now completely naked in public, and I don't know who I am, where I'm from, etc. And on top of all that, I can't see anything past the hallucinations at this point. So across this busy street, I see a group of what may or may not be people. And since I am completely petrified, I go over to them to try and ask for some kind of help. As I get closer, I start to hear yelling coming from the group, and a large guy comes running up to me. I thought he was going to hurt me, so I tried to run, but I stumbled into this dude's car, and he socked me right in the side of the face. I decided that communicating wasn't going to work with these people, so I stumbled away, back in the direction of my apartment. 9:55 p.m. As I am trying to get away from the dude who hit me, I hear someone yelling for me to fucking stop. This obviously terrifies me, so I run for my life in the opposite direction, only to be stopped by 3 people with guns drawn and pointed at me. I didn't realize that these people were police at the time, but they sure as heck were. They tried to shout some commands at me, but I couldn't understand anything they were trying to tell me. I tried to walk away, and I got hit with a taser. I watched the prongs float through the air at what seemed to be about 1/100th of life's normal speed. And as soon as it hit my skin, I was completely ripped from my body and entered a completely infinite black space. I am floating through this space, and I see a very small point of light about the size of a distant star, off in one direction. I decide to float in the direction of this light. As I draw nearer, I can make out colors coming from the light that I have never seen before. Not just shades of colors that I knew, but entirely new primary colors. I continue moving closer to the light, and I become aware of a very beautiful piece of music playing. It's a song I have never heard before in my life, but it feels so familiar to me that it completely relaxes me. As I realize this, I also begin to feel that I have been to this place before. The limitless void of nothingness with this distant light felt more comfortable than my own bed. I bask for what feels like hours in the presence of the most comforting feeling I have ever experienced. Meanwhile, as the light draws near, I realize that it's not a star, it's a book. I approach this massive book, which seems to be the only thing around, and flip through it. I don't actually reach out and touch it, but somehow, using my mind, I am able to turn the enormous and ancient-feeling pages of this book. It appears to be alive. It looks like a massive tree began to grow out of the nothingness around here, and instead of leaves, this book grew from its branches. The pages lay open in front of me. On the left page, there is a blue energy emitting from within the book itself. The energy manifests as blue veins twisting and splitting, all pointed toward the spine of the book. On the opposite page, there is a similar energy, but in red instead of blue. The words duality, truth, and you shouldn't be seeing this right now floated through my mind. As I heard the last words, I snapped out of it. It felt like I had literally existed as part of that black space for years, but as I came to, I was still in the middle of falling from being tased. So I hit the ground. I still had no funking idea who I was or anything, but the police ended up having to tase me 2 more times just to get me to stay on the ground. They loaded me into an ambulance, and I blacked out from there until I got to jail. This experience was by far the single most intense of my entire life. I just felt like sharing it here. I've come to accept it, and I actually took a lot of good things away from that trip, so I don't regret it. But I would not advise that you take that much LSD in a bad mood, or you will not be the same for a while. I hope that someone can learn from this experience and maybe keep themselves from making the same mistakes. This second post was created by a Reddit user known as likeagg. It follows a story about a group of friends who rented a cabin for a birthday, took acid together, and watched the night spiral into screaming, violence, and religious panic. This is one of the most disturbing trip reports I've ever read. The psychotic nightmare LSD trip straight from hell. This story starts out with my 4 friends, who are, for privacy purposes, let's call them A, F, R, and J, booked an Airbnb for his birthday, and we were planning to just relax and drop some acid. Me, A, and R have done acid in the past, and it was a great experience. For background purposes, I've experimented heavily with acid for the past 3 years, dropping upwards of almost 5 tabs at once, so I know what to expect when doing acid. However, this trip caught me completely off guard. F and J have always been curious about acid and wanted to drop it with us for their first time. We're all close friends, so we thought it would be a nice experience to try. So we get to our Airbnb, which is a cozy 2-story wooden cabin. We all decided to take 1 tab each. F and J were hesitant about taking 1 full tab, but they eventually agreed to it since we were all going to take 1 full tab. This is where I should have realized that maybe we should have taken a half or even a quarter since I didn't know the dosage of each tab. However, I've always gotten acid from this dealer and knew he was a reliable source, as my previous trips were always safe regarding the doses and legitimacy of the LSD. Okay, now we all take the tab at 3 p.m. For the first 45 minutes it was going well. We were watching the Garden of Words and talking about life, our relationships, and stuff like that. About another 45 minutes pass, and this is where the red flags start popping up. We all decide to go downstairs and just chill while I make food. F, A, and R are starting to lose themselves. Their sentences become incoherent, and they are unable to understand what me and J are saying. Even though it was J's first time taking acid, he held himself together quite well and was taking care of F, A, and R. A then stubs his toe on a chair and starts bleeding. This is when the nightmare starts. A is in pain, then starts to say, "Security check," about every 20 seconds. I believe the injury to A's toe started making him paranoid about the whole cabin, as he rented it in his name and wanted to make sure it was safe and stuff like that. So for about 30 to 40 minutes, he's repeating the phrase, "Security check." During this time frame, F and R are tripping out hard. They're starting to lose themselves completely. F is talking incoherent gibberish with A, while A is in pain and repeating "security check." R is sitting down by himself, funking out of his mind. He couldn't understand a word I said or what was going on, so me and J helped the 3 of them upstairs to relax and lay down a bit. I bring up the food I made while A is still saying "security check" over and over. This is when R and F fall asleep. No clue how someone falls asleep on acid. We had some nice lo-fi beats playing to lighten the mood. However, I don't think this helped. Me and Jay are still in our right minds and just chilling until F wakes up and starts acting strange. He tries doing a judo move on Jay. Jay thought this was normal behavior because we're into combat sports and spar a lot. This was the first big red flag. F then goes to me to try to judo flip me, but I counter it, and we end up on the bed. I ask him if he's good, and he quickly replies, "Yeah, I'm good," but awkwardly fast. Every time he talked, it was like he was rapping like Eminem. He had been speaking like this since we were downstairs. This is when shiz gets funking weird. F then goes to R, who is sleeping, and proceeds to claw at his face while asking if R is okay. F keeps his fingernails really long for some reason, so if he got to R's eyes, it would have been bad. We move R away from F and try to get him to relax a bit, because right now, me and Jay start to realize that F is not okay. F then starts spazzing the funk out. He falls onto the floor, then slams his leg onto R's head, who was sleeping on the floor. F is still spazzing out, rolling on the floor back and forth and getting into weird, contorted positions with his body like from the movie The Exorcist. He was also chanting and mumbling random shiz while spazzing out on the floor like a psychotic crackhead. At this point, A is coming back to his senses and is like, "What the funk is he doing?" Now this is when shiz really hits the fan. Upon seeing this, I go to the speaker to turn down the music. This is when F stands up and walks toward me, asking what I'm doing. I say, "Just turning down the music, bro," as I'm still a little freaked out by him. He pushes me violently aside and proceeds to grab the speaker and smash it on the ground. He then grabs the cord that was attached to the speaker and pulls on it while screaming, "What does it all mean?" at the top of his lungs. This scares the living funk out of me, A and J, all while R is still asleep through all of this. At this point, we're all freaked out by what F does. F proceeds to walk to the staircase, but along the way, he palm strikes R, who was starting to sit up. This causes R to fall back to the ground and go to sleep again. I'm not sure if he got knocked out. F also strikes me in the jaw right after hitting R, causing my jaw to slightly dislocate, which I didn't find out until after the trip. While this is happening, A tells him to chill out, and I shiz you not. F responds in the most demonic, funking voice. Chill out? No, you chill out. Like he sounded like a legit satanic demon saying that. After F hit my jaw, my first instinct was to clinch and take him to the ground. I had trained BJJ/Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for almost a year by then, so my instincts just kicked in. We hit the ground, and I pinned him with the help of Jay. Remember, this is Jay's first time taking acid as well, so he's freaking the funk out by what was happening to F. F is violent as funk and as strong as funk on the ground. He's struggling and chanting random shiz to himself like he's possessed or something. He breaks free a couple of times and attacks everyone. He smashed A's face in with a closed fist repeatedly until I got him off. He's also kicking anyone in front of him as we pin him, all while trying to bite us. He would scratch, hit, bite, or do anything he could to harm us. Every time we pin him, he arches his back like that one scene from The Exorcist, where the girl is walking down the stairs like a spider. Thank God I knew BJJ, because F looked like he was set on hurting all of us. This was a nightmare. His pupils were dilated to the point where his whole eye was just black. He would glare at me and Jay as we were pinning him down. By far, this was so fucking creepy, as I thought he was a demon. F is screaming gibberish and making weird noises while trying to contort his body like the girl from The Exorcist. At times, he would arch his back and stick his tongue out while trying to throw up, making the most demonic noises I've ever heard. What he was doing was straight from a horror movie, and it creeped me the funk out. At 8 p.m., this is when R wakes up. When R wakes up, he can't believe what is happening. He thinks that he died during the acid trip and is now in hell. The reason being is that R sees that I'm bleeding and my face is swollen while pinning down F with J, all while A is having a mental breakdown witnessing this. R says to himself, F would never hurt us like this. This isn't real. It's just a dream. He then proceeds to scream, Jesus Christ, at the top of his lungs repeatedly. The screaming triggers F to fight us even harder. R screams, Jesus Christ, and repeats Bible verses for at least 3 hours while F is trying to fight us. During those 3 hours, me and Jay are pinning down F, who is tripping out harder and harder as R keeps screaming, Jesus Christ, repeatedly. F then screams and makes demonic throw-up noises while trying to get loose as a response to R's religious babble. Imagine this, one guy screaming Jesus Christ repeatedly and saying Bible verses at the top of his lungs, while another guy is actively trying to harm you as you pin him down, all while you're still tripping on acid. It was a funking nightmare to say the least. The screaming, chanting, and constant fear of being seriously hurt was all that me, A, and J could think of at the time. A recollects himself and begins watching R and calming him down while trying to get him to be quiet, as the neighbors around our Airbnb are still awake. 11 p.m. hits and R snaps out of it. A few minutes later, F then snaps out of it. I didn't know for sure if he was back to normal, as he asked us for water and stopped fighting us. Me and Jay cautiously let him up. However, F has his back turned toward me. In case he went apeshiz crazy again, I could quickly get his back and restrain him. However, he's normal again. Me, A, and J experience the chaos and destruction done by F and R, who weren't aware of what they were doing during their psychotic trip. This trip made me realize acid is not for everyone, and that we should have taken some precautions beforehand. Psychedelics can either be a heavenly experience or a hellish nightmare that won't end. F and R didn't realize how serious the situation was until we told them afterward. To be honest, I'm not sure if they realized the severity of what me, J, and A experienced that night. I thought I knew what I was getting into, but holy shiz, I will think twice the next time I try LSD with anyone. We all remain friends to this day, but me, A, and J will remember the nightmare hell of a trip that we experienced. This trip will forever be ingrained in my mind as the worst LSD trip I've ever experienced in my life. I needed to get this off my chest and thought this was the right place to post this. That's gonna do it for today's episode of Addicts of Reddit. Let me know in the comments what you thought of these stories, and if you want to see more videos like this. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow. And before you go, check out one of the videos on screen now.